Picture this. You walk into a doctor's office, but, well, this isn't a modern clinic. The doctor doesn't take your blood pressure. There's no stethoscope in sight. Instead, they examine your skin tone, ask about your recent mood, glance out the window to check the season, and then confidently diagnose exactly what's going wrong deep inside your body. Welcome to our explainer on what might just be the ultimate medical illusion.
Okay, let's dive right into this bizarre alternate reality of ancient medicine. Think about it. There were absolutely zero modern diagnostic tools. No labs, no MRI scans, no blood tests. By today's standards, they were flying completely blind. Yet, this system was so deeply trusted, so woven into human psychology and society, that nobody seriously challenged it for nearly 2 millennia.
Their entire diagnostic toolkit basically boiled down to environmental and superficial cues, just seasons and skin tone, along with your general temperament. Honestly, it sounds a bit like magic, right? Or maybe a modern astrology reading. But to the absolute most brilliant minds of the ancient world, checking if it was a humid spring or a dry autumn was literally the pinnacle of medical science.
Which brings us to a massive, glaring question. How did a completely wrong theory survive for 2,000 years? How did a fundamentally broken system work well enough that the smartest, most observant people who ever lived never stopped to say, hey, wait a minute, are we entirely wrong about this? To understand that cognitive trap, we have to look at the very foundation of their medical universe. And that foundation rests on a single number: 4. Ancient Greek physicians, building on even older human traditions, believed that the entire human body, your health, your personality, your literal life or death, was governed by 4 specific, incredibly powerful fluids. We call these the 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Now, it is so easy for us to look at this list today and just dismiss it. But this exact theory shaped Western medicine longer than almost any other scientific idea in recorded human history. It was the absolute, unquestioned law of the human body. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer, beautiful complexity of the system. This wasn't just some basic list. It was a comprehensive theory of everything. Every humor was tied to an element, a season, and a personality type. Blood was air and spring, making you cheerful or sanguine. Yellow bile was fire and summer, making you choleric or quick to anger. Black bile was earth and autumn, leading to a thoughtful or melancholy state. And phlegm was water and winter, making you calm or phlegmatic. It was this elegant, fully connected web of logic that human brains just love to find patterns in. So here's how that logic actually played out in the clinic. Let's say you had a fever. The doctor wouldn't even think about viruses or bacteria. Those didn't exist to them. They'd look at their framework and see that a fever meant excess heat. Heat meant fire, and fire meant an excess of yellow bile. So the logical treatment: cool the body and drain the excess bile. To them, it made perfect, intuitive sense. Now, contrast that with a patient who comes in feeling sluggish, pale, and cold. That pointed directly to an excess of phlegm, the watery, wintry humor. The fix leaned entirely toward the opposite: warming remedies, hot foods, and physical stimulation to literally melt away the cold. When you understand this internal logic, you really start to see why doctors felt so incredibly confident. They had a structured, definitive answer for literally every single symptom. So the crucial point here is understanding the psychological trap that kept these brilliant minds stuck. The theory was what philosophers call unfalsifiable. It was so incredibly flexible that it could explain absolutely any possible outcome after the fact. This internal consistency didn't actually make it true, but man, it made it dangerously convincing to the human brain. It created a massive confirmation bias loop. Think about it. If the patient recovers, the doctor proudly declares, "The treatment worked. We balanced the humors." But what if the patient tragically dies? The doctor didn't blame the theory. No way. They just say, well, we must have guessed the wrong balance, or the patient just had a stubbornly weak constitution, or even the autumn season was just too powerful to overcome. The theory itself was never wrong, only the application was. Now, what really cemented this into history was the psychology of authority. You had the towering presence of ancient mega-physicians. Hippocrates was the one who first systematized the idea, and later the Roman physician Galen wrote absolute volumes defending it. Their written words were basically unquestionable. If you were a young medical student, you simply didn't challenge Galen. You just didn't do it. Instead, their texts were taught as near scripture for well over 1,000 years. And this wasn't just a localized Greek idea anymore either. It built the entire foundational structure of how medicine was practiced across all of Europe and the entire Islamic world. It was universally accepted as the absolute truth of human biology. Let's move along and see how this builds into something much, much darker. Because the theory didn't stay in the classroom. It wasn't just abstract philosophy debated by scholars in towers. It dictated real-world treatments on real, living, breathing people. And the consequences of acting on a completely fabricated biological system were incredibly severe. The most infamous of these treatments was bloodletting. If your illness was caused by an excess of blood, well, the obvious, undeniable medical fix was to get rid of it. Doctors used cuts, leeches, and these terrifying specialized tools to drain their patients. And I really want to be clear here, this wasn't some fringe folk remedy. This was the gold standard of care prescribed by the most respected physicians of the day for everything from a mild headache to severe mental illness. Just think about the massive scale of this timeline for a second. Systematized around 400 BC in ancient Greece, by the 1200s, it's the absolute standard in Islamic and European hospitals. And unbelievably, bloodletting was still widely used well into the 1800s. This massive error in human judgment spanned over 2 millennia. It did not just quietly fade away. In fact, it affected the very highest levels of society. In 1799, George Washington fell ill with a throat infection. His world-class physicians, literally the absolute best money could buy, resorted to the humors. Historical evidence shows they bled him multiple times in a single day, removing a massive amount of his blood. It's highly, highly likely that the very treatment meant to save the first U.S. president actually accelerated his tragic death. It is a heavy, dark reality to process. A framework built with the pure intention to heal the body ended up actively harming the very people it was meant to help, generation after generation, for 2,000 years. It is perhaps one of the greatest psychological and scientific tragedies in human history. So a question naturally arises here. What finally broke the spell? How did the medical world eventually manage to escape a 2,000-year-old cognitive trap that had completely ensnared the greatest minds in history? The answer is that it wasn't one single aha moment or a lone genius making a sudden discovery. It was a slow, methodical accumulation of hard evidence. First, scientists began accurately observing blood circulation. Then, they started studying actual tissue under early microscopes. Finally, they began meticulously mapping how disease actually spread and affected organs. They stopped relying on ancient books and started looking directly at the true mechanics of the human body. This shift really peaked in the 1600s and 1700s with the rise of modern anatomy. Once doctors could physically see what was happening inside, once they had the tools to peer beneath the skin without just guessing based on a patient's mood or the autumn weather, the four humors simply collapsed. A balanced fluid chart just couldn't account for the microscopic reality of cells and pathogens. The humors finally became just a historical artifact. The core lesson this leaves us with is absolutely profound. We can't look back and just call ancient physicians foolish. They weren't careless thinkers at all. They were highly observant, fiercely logical, and working in absolute good faith to save lives with the tools they had. The real danger wasn't a lack of intelligence. The danger was trusting a flexible theory taught by absolute authorities, where everyone was so deeply confident that questioning the foundation seemed completely absurd. Which leaves us with a fascinating and, perhaps slightly unsettling, mirror to hold up to our own time. If the smartest people in the world were perfectly logically wrong for 2,000 years, what confident, obvious ideas that we hold today will look exactly the same to someone looking back at us 200 years from now? It's a powerful reminder to always stay curious, to watch out for our own cognitive traps, and to never stop questioning the world around us. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you in the next one.